Many people aspire to own a home. Indeed, it is an ideal considered the hallmark of success for most middle-class workers when they have their own roof over their head. It is argued that owning a home has both financial and social benefits, but there are a variety of things to consider before one becomes the proud owner of a house. The cost of the property, the cost of credit in terms of interest rates, and the cost of construction. How can these restricting factors be brought under control without interfering with healthy market forces? Also in this edition of KTN Business Weekly, the business success feature and your question answered by an expert. Good evening and welcome to this edition of KTN Business Weekly. I'm Michael Oyer. Tonight, we propose the establishment of a regulator for the housing or construction industry. Is there a place for the enforcement of zoning, the introduction of a transaction registry, a lease register, and a mortgage lender of last resort? Would these measures reduce or do away with the situation that leads to crises in the housing industry, like the one currently gripping the country? Our feature has more.
It is just one day after the housing bill went into second reading in Parliament, with the sole aim of providing policy grounding for the sector in Kenya. And the KCB S&L Developers Club are being hosted to a briefing session on their upcoming trip to South Africa, while they are meant to travel to see and experience new and alternative building technologies in a more developed market. The rapt attention and interested looks here indicate just how seriously these people are taking housing.
So right here in our own continent, there's a beautiful example of what true technological and great thinking is. You look at places like Sandton City that was created to remove the congestion from the city of Johannesburg and has now taken over as a business hub of South Africa.
How can the government deliver this as quickly as possible in a very proactive way, so that all the land then is no longer speculating. Landowners would no longer be speculating on what is coming. It is either here or there is a clear frame on how it is going to be brought in.
Indeed, the interest more and more would-be developers are taking in the housing sector indicates not just the opportunity available in the sector, but also the pent-up demand, which some would describe as now having reached crisis proportion. Indeed, government's own statistics indicate that home ownership in Kenya is dismally low, especially in the country's urban areas. In Nairobi alone, home ownership is below 10%, according to the Kenya Integrated Household Budget Survey (KIHBS) of 2005-2006. That means that in Nairobi, less than 100,000 households own the houses they live in. Scientific research has supported the notion that home ownership increases family unions, lowers divorce rates, secures better education for children, raises financial literacy and financial security, and enables homeowners manage their finances better. The downside then being that majority of the Kenyan population is thus unable to enjoy these benefits, so long as home ownership remains out of their reach. The decision to own a home is driven by a number of considerations, which include the cost of the property, the cost of credit or interest rates, and construction costs. Current statistics indicate that the cost of land comprises at least 40% of the cost of a house today. The astronomical cost of land in Kenya today is an issue that even government has had to grapple with.
The chosen path on free market will be allowed to play on matters of land, particularly for land which is owned by the private sector, and it has to change hands on willing buyer, willing seller basis. That then will be subject to demand and supply trends.
Land has always been an emotive subject in Kenya, not least because of the shortcomings in law governing the sector in the past and the situation that has been created today as a result.
I see the opportunity coming from the new legal regimes from the constitutional framework, you see the counties have been given a specific mandate to address housing issues and provide housing. So counties can seize that opportunity, like the Nairobi County, and have specific instruments that mobilize resources and service land and create housing products and create maybe regimes that will encourage innovation in the housing sector, where there are affordable materials, where people have technologies of mass housing production that is affordable and flexible.
Other than the exercise of zoning in urban areas, which as part of the urban planning is the process that restricts the type of building allowed in a place, which also determines population densities, also important is the need to create a transactions registry, where all transactions of property are registered, in turn providing the history of a property and the various number of times that the same property has changed hands. This not only forestalls speculative behavior, but also reduces the cases of fraudulent titles.
The National Land Policy Framework, because it is providing for land banking, it is providing for controls or measures of stabilizing land markets to remove speculation, such that the people who are just taking land for the sake of taking have penalties that are visited upon them. For instance, if you get a development lease that has conditions that you want to develop housing, and you stay with that land beyond the period of 2 years that would take to do a reasonable development, then it starts attracting a lot of taxation, property taxation, that forces you to release it back to the market. So that way, then you will not have people motivated to just get land and hold it and push prices up for the sake of pushing prices up.
There then is the need to create a lease register for all contracting of property. Landlords and tenants have to permit for a more transparent atmosphere in the hire of space, especially to provide for competitive rental rates. Rents may be high on account of low transparency of rent pricing. Lease registers would also reduce the transaction costs of letting property. Skyrocketing land prices have also been fueled by a failure to adequately open up new land for development, a factor which now means that there is very high pressure on currently available land.
I mean, the Nairobi City Council cannot show you any land that they have serviced in the last, say, 10, 20 years, or houses they are built for rental or to bring to that market. So there is that gap that used to be filled by those entities that is left. And then you have that kind of deficit coming from those sources, and it is deficits that could be accounted for, comparing with the growth of population, urban population.
But all is not lost. Indeed, a lot of proactive steps have been undertaken in the recent past, albeit with limited success. The expansion of major thoroughfares like Thika Road is a case in point.
If you see the impact of Thika Road, just Thika Road alone, in terms of how it's opened up that area, you can see that with the government's investment in infrastructure, you will see a lot more possibilities in terms of how far you can reach, and there the land is much more affordable. The other issue is also in terms of the investments in things like the rail system, which would then also allow you to come from, from all the way from beyond Thika, to come to work comfortably in half an hour without considering traffic issues.
The inaccessibility and unaffordability of credit facilities though remains a challenge that even banks are grappling with currently. Mortgages continue to remain out of reach for many Kenyans, though for those proactive institutions out there, this presents an opportunity to be tapped.
Only 8% currently of the market would qualify for a mortgage. And we want to really bring the mortgage availability to quite a big portion of the pyramid. And that is our dream as KCB. There's a lot of emphasis in terms of our support with the developers, and we are constantly working with them to make sure that we bring to the market houses that are more affordable. And what is affordability? It depends on the individual ability.
However, despite the fact that a free market approach to housing enables society find its own level of housing provision, most developed economies have had to create a housing lender or regulator of last resort, with a function to not only regulate the sector but also provide interventions that take care of those who are constrained in ability. Countries such as Malaysia, Hong Kong, and the United Arab Emirates have had to create regulatory frameworks to appropriately guide their economies towards prosperous home ownership. In Kenya, whatever the facts may be, at just 8% penetration for house ownership in the total setting, the unfettered free market approach to home ownership seems to already be creating too many losers rather than winners in the equation, which just may be an indication of the need for urgent regulatory intervention.
When KTN Business Weekly returns, the Business Success feature takes us to Diani at the coast, an area known for its beaches, but today we see it in a different perspective. And later, on your question answered, we have the expert tonight, Caroline Kariuki, who heads up the mortgage end of the business at KCB.
It is called a dome palm. Locals here refer to it as the mukoma tree. We find out how they are creatively turning the branches into lampshades, baskets, and even this kind of hats for sale, conveniently earning themselves a decent livelihood.
Sana sana na deal na handicraft, kazi ya mkono, ambapo especially ni kusuka lampshades, baskets na hat, kofia hizi. Ikibidi pia mara nyingine tuna seti vitu kama viti hizi na vitanda.
For Salim and his peers here in Ukunda, they have to travel as far as Msambweni in Kwale, where the raw materials are easily accessible. When harvested, the dome palm branches are wet, but they are dried ready for use by these entrepreneurs. However, as Salim explains, these processes are labor-intensive and costly, bearing in mind that they have to transport their products all the way to Diani.
Transportation kuanzia hapa mpaka Msambweni, huwa tunalipa kama 3,000 hivi ama 2,800. Material hii tunayotumia kwa wakati wa nyuma ilikuwa tunapata tu humu karibu na maeneo yetu ya kazi mule tunafanya, lakini sasa kwa wakati huu imekuwa ni haba sana. Tunaipata sehemu ya mbali kidogo Msambweni.
They buy the bundles of already dried palm fronds at a cost of about 250 shillings for every 100, although at times the price fluctuates to about 300 shillings. Musa Salim explains how he goes about the art of converting the branches into useful products.
Kuna framework ambayo tunafanya ya waya, tunatumia waya katika hizi vitu tunatengeneza. Unaseti frame yako, alafu unachukua size ya kile kitu ambacho utakuwa ukiframe, ndio unakata sasa ile stick ya mkoma, alafu unaanza kuchonga tena kuifanya fine yani. Yaani tuseme kama ambaye unipiga randa, huwezi funga tu stick kubwa vile iko, kulingana na shape ya kile kitu ambacho unakitengeneza, alafu ndio unaanza kutengeneza.
Traditionally, the dome palm is not grown. It's left to grow on its own. And though residents here seem to have left them to just grow and beautify the environment naturally, entrepreneurs like Musa Salim have learned the art of making a living out of it.
Once the branches are ready, he creatively displays them in his working yard, tagging others on tree branches and hanging lines so they are visible and attractive to prospective buyers by the roadside. The products have different prices and he prices them according to the amount of labor involved, the number of days he has worked on them, and the amount of material he has spent in creating the finished product.
Kwa mfano hii, inachukua siku 3. Nitahesabu kwa siku mimi, tuseme nitajiwekea kama 200 kama fundi. Kwa hiyo itakuwa ni 600 hiyo. Alafu tena naongeza material, ambapo hapo nitasema material yake inaingia kama shilingi 200 hizi. Kwa maana pana waya hapo, na hizo sticks plus hizo zingine za kuwevu hizo rafia Sasa tuseme hiki kitu nitauza kwa shilingi 800.
The entrepreneurs also market and sell the products to the many beach resorts and hotels in the town, where the lampshades find a ready market. Other products like hats and baskets are in high demand by the touring visitors, both domestic and foreign. Salim is nevertheless grateful to God that he is able to fend for his family with the proceeds from the venture. On average, he earns profits of between 5,000 and 6,000 shillings a week from this trade.
To the market report now, where inflation for the month of April stands at 12.05%, while economic growth figures are now 5.6% for the full year 2010. The Kenya Bureau of Statistics recently downgraded its economic growth outlook for the year 2011 to just over 4.2%. The 91-day Treasury bill is attracting interest at 6.41%, 162 basis points above last week, while the 182-day tenor and the 364 papers are attracting interest at 5.44% and 6.77% respectively. The average bank deposit rate stood at 13.92% at the end of April this year, while the average bank deposit rate stood at 3.47% at the time, meaning that banks were enjoying an interest rate spread of 10.45%. And now looking at the Nairobi Stock Exchange, there are 12 stocks currently trading with dividends. The yields range from 1.4% at the Standard Group to 2.20% at Jubilee Holdings. The other stocks trading with dividends are Housing Finance, Kakuzi, TPS Eastern Africa, the Nation Media Group, Cooperative Bank, Total Kenya Sasini, Kenya Insurance Corporation, Crown Berger, Safaricom and the Standard Group, as mentioned already. And in other announcements, at the Nairobi Stock Exchange, Jubilee Holdings is issuing 1 bonus share for every 10 shares currently held. The books close on the 26th of May. On Your Question Answer tonight, we host Caroline Kariuki, head of the mortgage arm of KCB and SNL, and the question we ask is just what are the initial steps to take when an individual wants to own a house?
Thank you, Michael. It's very exciting to hear that you've just started working and you want to own a home, and indeed you can. The first steps would be in opening a savings account. There is a tax benefit that the government allows you on savings towards a mortgage. So even as you do that, you and your friends could come together and purchase a plot. And now we also have a lot of people moving towards giving smaller units. So don't really worry about whether you can own a home. If you walk to SNL, we look at where you are at in terms of what salary you're earning and look at the best way to structure a facility that will enable you to own a home.
Thank you very much, Caroline Kariuki, for your question. And thank you for watching this edition of KTN Business Weekly. Let's know your thoughts and do send that question for an expert via email. The email address is ktnbizweekly@standardmedia.co.ke, or you can send a text message to 8040. And all from the entire KTN Business Weekly team, until next week's edition of KTN Business Weekly, good night. I'll be returning shortly with KTN Prime.